Hello everybody and very warm welcome to Rejuveron's second symposium. At Rejuveron, we are attempting to tackle humanity's oldest problem, aging. We hence must have the courage to open new doors to scientific discoveries, even if we are not sure where they might lead us. The reason is clear. Still, for many people, old age means a deterioration in health, reduced mobility, cognitive function, and relentless pain. Age-related diseases continue to place an unsustainable burden on healthcare systems across the world. Is this what we wish for ourselves, our children, or indeed the 1 billion people alive aged over 60? As we aspire to live longer and becoming elderly means being over 80, not over 60, how can we turn today's generation into generation health? It's my great pleasure to welcome you to this second Rejuveron Age Better, Live Longer Symposium. We can't promise to completely answer those big questions for you today, but we will be knocking on a few doors to find out where the answers might lie. We have a very distinguished lineup of panelists from the world of longevity in each of our 4 sessions today, and I'm very grateful to them for providing their unique insights with us. We'll take a glimpse into how the fundamental causes of aging are being unraveled. I firmly believe that we are now seeing the dawn of real anti-aging medicine. For generation health, medical intervention will not only treat and prevent disease to enable us to live longer. Crucially, it will also offer treatments to enable everyone for us to be lived healthier. We are now going to show you a short movie that sums up everything we're trying to do in longevity research at Rejuveron.
Let me tell you something about doors. Anytime you step through one, the arc of your life might change forever. You don't always know what lies behind it, but that's part of its beauty. Some mark new beginnings, first steps into the unknown. Others welcome you, tempt you, entice you. Then there are doors that show you a whole new perspective, a view of the world you could have never imagined. Sometimes, though, there's a door that haunts you and taunts you and knocks you to your knees. But you get up, you fight back, and you overcome the obstacles that once seemed so daunting. Now you stride confidently through new doors, without even knowing where they might lead. Because it's behind these guardians of the unknown that you will find opportunities, wonders that exceed your greatest expectations. And best of all, the choice is always yours. Which door will you open next?
Thank you. So as I mentioned, we must have the courage to open new doors to scientific discoveries, even if we are not sure where they might lead us. To take us through today's session and to keep us all on track, I'd like to welcome back the esteemed science journalist and broadcaster, Vivian Perry.
Hello, and Matthias, thank you so much. Well, I was involved in the previous symposium, and all I can tell you, and you no doubt will know if you attended it, that it was fantastic. So we've got an even bigger and better event for you today. We've got 4 sessions. We are going to have a brief break between each one for a quick pit stop for you all. and we will also be taking questions. So don't put the questions, if you have any, in the chat function. Put them please in the Q&A as we go through, and I will be taking those questions and putting them to our panels as we have each of the sessions. We are going to start big with an overview, then we're going to talk about translation, we're going to talk about cutting edge science, and finally we're going to be talking visions with Christian Angermeyer. So that will be an exciting finish to our event, I'm sure. So I am the person who is supposed to keep time. So let me tell you why Brits are chosen for these kind of roles is because we are 90% Mary Poppins, but 10% Margaret Thatcher, by which I mean I'm really a bit bossy. So let me say to all our speakers that if I interrupt you, it's in the interest of the event, and please don't take it personally. But to start us off in our first session, we have, as I said, an overview. So we're talking about aging, society's biggest challenge, but also science's golden opportunity. And can I introduce the first of our very distinguished speakers? And it gives me great pleasure to introduce one of the best known people in this field, Suresh Rattan, who's Professor Emeritus of Biogerontology at the Department of Molecular Biology and Genetics at Aarhus University in Denmark, which is a very fine place if you should be near there. His research and expertise is both broad and it's deep. Aging of human cells in culture, prevention, removal and repair of macromolecular damage, and applying the concept of mild stress-induced hormesis as a modulator of aging. I suspect we may hear more about hormesis from Suresh. He's the discoverer of the several skincare products that are now used, the aging modulatory effects of kinetin and zeatin, which are used in, as I said, skincare products, recipient of multiple awards, and a prolific author and founder and editor-in-chief of the Biogerontology journal published by Springer Biogerontology. So with that, Suresh, will you introduce the subject for us?
Well, thank you very much, Vivian, for your generous and kind introduction. Well, I'm going to start with, first of all, clapping for all of us, congratulating ourselves as human beings who have challenged the limits created by evolution. This is the great achievement of human beings in many countries, although there are still some gaps, that we can expect to live almost double than what evolution intended our species to live. And this is a very important celebration we should do, that becoming old and living longer is actually going beyond what evolution intended for us. Now, what I mean by that is that evolution for every species somehow ends up creating a period which is necessary for its growth, development, maturation, and development. And that we call essential lifespan, which for our species, Homo sapiens, is about 45 years. Yeah. It's not that everybody dies at 45, even in old times, some people will continue to live. But now in modern times, this is the greatest achievement of modern societies, rich societies especially, and biomedicine and all the other helps available, that we can expect to live more than double than that. Now, the fantastic thing is that evolution, although it needed us to live as a species about 45 years, it has not created any enemies in my body or any genes or any other mechanisms to kill me. Evolution has worked on survival mechanisms, but only enough for about 45 years or essential lifespan of the species. And the second part of the beauty is that evolution hasn't made any killing mechanisms, nor has it made any life or say infinitely maintaining mechanisms. So when we have achieved this great success in living beyond essential lifespan, that is when We talk about the appearance of aging and all the symptoms associated with that and all the problems associated with that. So I wish I could say something good about becoming old at a biological level. We have to accept that fact with whatever sadness it is, that yes, longer we live than essential lifespan, more problems we are going to have, and progressively we are going to lose health, and the loss of health is the ultimate reason for all those clinical diagnoses and eventual death. Evolution is not going to do much about it, or if it is doing, it will take hundreds of millions of years again to do it. So we have to do something about it, and people are really working harder on that. As I said, I wish I could say anything good about getting old biologically. And socially also, we don't want to become old. That's also, there is not much to say good about it, because there we talk about old age as a burden, as a problem, as a tsunami, as a economic terror or burden. All those negative things we talk about old age, which I don't like to talk in that way. I would like to say old age is a privilege. It is not our birthright. We have achieved it. But the thing is, yes, evolution hasn't given us tool to live happily, healthily forever or less than ever. So we have to do something about it. So there is this open requirement that we must do everything we can at scientific level, social level, economic level, to make this living part across essential lifespan much healthier and happier. And yes, you will listen to some of the scientists who are in the front row of developing new single target oriented interventions, specific pathways oriented interventions, or lifestyle interventions. So my whole approach is basically about understanding aging as a progressive loss of health. How can I maintain health? How can I recover health if I have lost some? Or how can I enhance health? That will have its effects on all other symptoms and problems or beauties or whatever of aging and the lifespan. So instead of targeting the lifespan or even health span, targeting health at almost all ages, but specifically when we enter into old age. And that's where, like Vivian already mentioned, that one area which I have been working on a lot is the holistic area of hormesis, where you challenge the system, because body has its own living mechanisms, its own survival mechanisms. They are not perfect. So we have to help them. And one way to help them is to challenge them repeatedly at low level, and you get benefits. And the paradigm of this kind of phenomenon, which we call hormesis, is physical exercise. What is good about physical exercise biochemically? Nothing. It produces more oxidants, it produces free radicals, it produces acids, it destroys the cell. But everybody knows that exercise done of the legs improves your mind and your brain and your immune system. That is the field of hormesis, and the things like exercise we call hormetins. Maybe in the discussion section I might develop upon that, but that's where a lot of commercial possibilities are also developing, that what kind of stresses from physical side, from mental side, from nutritional side we should incorporate. And that's how I would like to set the scene for how to understand aging and do something about it, because we have to do something about it. Nature has done its best, what it could do so far. Okay, Vivian, you can take over from here.
So nature's done its best, and a very interesting presentation there. So old age is a privilege, and it's a progressive loss of health that we really need to do something about. So now let me thank Suresh and introduce Brian Kennedy. Professor Brian Kennedy is internationally recognized for his research in the basic biology of aging, and also as a visionary committed to translating research discoveries into new ways of delaying, detecting, and preventing human aging and associated diseases. He's professor in the departments of Biochemistry and Physiology at the National University of Singapore, and director of the Centre for Healthy Aging in the National University Health System. And until recently, he was the president and CEO of the Buck Institute for Aging, and he remains a professor at that institute. So Brian, let's have your take on this.
Well, I think that I'd start out by saying it's really people think we don't spend much money on aging, trying to treat aging, and it's a myth. We spend a fortune in the healthcare system trying to treat aging. The problem is that we're treating the effects of aging, not aging itself. And so we spend money treating Alzheimer's disease and most forms of cancer, which are age-related, and diabetes. These are essentially what's happened when the aging train has fallen off the tracks. And so we rush out there and spend a lot of money to pick the train up, put it back on the tracks, get it working again. And it doesn't work very well at that point. I think what we've learned from research in the aging field is that the whole process of aging is what we should be thinking about. And I agree with Suresh that we have to be helping people to stay healthy and maintain function throughout their life course, and trying to slow the aging process, because we know it's the biggest risk factor for all these diseases we're spending a fortune on spending money ineffectively. We can spend that same money much more effectively on keeping people healthy. And so they have a delay before they even begin to get sick. They have a higher life quality, and that's a huge economic victory at the same time. Now, you might say that it's not possible to do much about the aging process, but we know already that that's not true. We know lifestyle interventions help you stay healthy longer. Suresh mentioned exercise, healthy nutrition, maintaining stress levels or managing stress levels, sleep quality. All these things are very important for aging. And more recently, there have been a development of a large number of interventions that, at least in animal models, can delay the aging process, and in some cases even compress morbidity, so reduce the amount of time that you're sick at the end of life. And I think we're at this point now where we have lots of ideas for how to target aging. We have supplements, we have drugs, people are thinking about gene therapy and cell replacement therapy, and with the advent of, especially of these mRNA vaccines, there's a lot more interest in mRNA-based therapies. All of these things have potential. And we're at the stage where what we need to do is to try to figure out ways to validate whether they impact the aging process in humans. And the other exciting thing that's developed is that there are now many aging biomarkers that have the potential to measure the rate of your biologic aging. So we know how fast you age chronologically. Your passport's really good at that. But we all know also that people age at different rates. And now we're starting to be able to measure that. So when you combine the interventions together with the measures of aging, we're starting to have the potential now to really validate that we can affect the rate of human aging and actually keep people healthy longer. So I think I want to reinforce the concepts that have been brought up already. This is really a life course approach, and it's a health-based approach rather than a sick care-based approach. It's one that we need to focus on because we have to keep people healthy later in life, as Suresh said. It's a challenge that's facing us as humanity. And I think the potential is there to have really huge impacts on the life quality of individuals going forward if we really target this aging process effectively. So I'm excited where the field is. I agree that we're on the brink, that as Matthias said, that we're on the brink of making major breakthroughs, and hopefully that'll happen soon. I'm really excited to be a part of it.
Thank you very much indeed. And let's now go to our third speaker, Björn Schumacher. Professor Schumacher is director of the Institute for Genome Stability in Aging and Diseases at CCAD, which is a research centre based at the University of Cologne. And he coordinated CODAGE, which was the FP7 Marie Curie initial training network on chronic DNA damage in aging. Professor Schumacher is president of the German Society for Aging Research, and his research interest focuses on the molecular mechanisms through which DNA damage contributes to cancer development and aging-associated diseases. Björn, over to you.
Thank you, Vivian, so much for this introduction. And it's been great to follow the two previous speakers who really already provided a really great groundwork of what is the challenge of aging. Now, aging research has really provided us in the last couple of decades fundamental insights into the mechanisms of aging. And it's clear that health, maintenance of health, is the #1 issue of the societal challenge of aging. And it is clear that it's now the time that the fundamental research, the insight we gained into the mechanisms of aging are now translated, are implemented into the clinic for the benefit of maintaining human health and replacing the multimorbidity that's associated with aging, with healthy aging. And there are some short-term innovations that really are being introduced right now. For example, slowing down degenerative processes. A good example for that is, for example, Parkinson, where even in the absence of a cure, there are treatments that can slow down the pathology and even allow regaining some degree of function. The advantage of these short-term focusing on specific diseases of aging is certainly that there are clinical endpoints for that, but the disadvantage is that it's not sustainable for an aging society. And instead, as Brian alluded to already, we need to address aging at its mechanistic fundamental core, at the causes of aging. And here, the ultimate cause of aging that Suresh has alluded to, it's really in the evolutionary biology of aging, which is pretty much settled, which is just that old age has no fitness contribution in evolutionary history, and therefore maintenance and repair of our homeostatic processes are limited to the age that has been reached traditionally, and predominantly this is the pre-reproductive age, where maintenance and repair occurs extremely efficiently in the human body. But any homeostatic process can fail in aging. Homeostasis of the entire organism has to be constantly maintained, and therefore a multitude of proximate causes contribute to the aging process in a human. And even genetic variants that have adverse effects in old age can limit lifespan. An example for that is the ApoE4 isoform, an Alzheimer risk isoform, that is virtually absent in centenarians, suggesting that this is an example of a genetic variant that can limit lifespan. So it's really a plethora of homeostatic processes, of genetic variants that are not compatible with health at old age. There's one molecule that is really set apart from all other macromolecular structures that need to be maintained, which is the genome, because it's irreplaceable. It contains all information for building and maintaining a cell, but at the same time, it's constantly under attack even from metabolic byproducts, from very normal physiological metabolism. It has to be constantly maintained. Our genome maintenance mechanisms are limited. Dysfunction in single gene or repair genes can greatly accelerate aging. And here it is a prerequisite for health maintenance that we tackle the repair mechanisms, the maintenance mechanisms at their fundamental state. And this is a complex process, and we should not underestimate the complexity of the repair mechanisms, the complexity of the homeostatic processes that need to be maintained in the body. And therefore, we need to find a balance. We need to promote both. We need to promote fundamental research, discovery science, where investments have essentially stagnated, and we are greatly lacking really the expansion of fundamental research that can then provide the new innovations for the clinical implementation, for the translation of research into clinical practice, into health maintenance. And there's been a pouring of investments into commercialization. But we need to really promote both fundamental research and the translation, the commercialization, and the clinical implementation of the advances of aging research.
Björn, thank you very much indeed. And I'm taking from you all that this is a very multifaceted problem. And however much some people might like to promote it, there is no single silver bullet. And I wondered whether you were considering at what point should you intervene, because where along the continuum is it at 45? It's perhaps our natural lifespan. Suresh, where do you think we ought to intervene? Or do you think this is a life course literally from the moment a child is born?
No. For interventions from aging and old age point of view, I will think an optimal cut point or start point is around 40. Before we reach our species' essential lifespan, because until then, evolution has done a great job in optimizing various maintenance, repair, survival mechanisms so that individuals can grow, mature, and reproduce. And we know that too much fitness on the early part of life can sometimes even cost at the level of reproduction. Okay, I won't go into this disposable soma theory or trade-off aspects. So the way I understand the phenomenon of aging and the progression of aging at a biological level, yeah, although sociological level, I will say that the day I celebrated my 45th birthday, which was 20 years ago, that's when I entered into old age. But yes, of course, it won't be old age because in modern societies, that's actually the best period. So then we call it middle age, early old age, then late old age, and then even terminal old age. So from my understanding of interventions from health maintenance, recovery, and enhancement in old age should be from about age 40. That's when biochemically a lot of data shows things start happening and happen exponentially.
Thank you. And Brian, it's we always tend to say that old age is 10 years older than we are, whatever our age is. But there is an issue in that we all think of ourselves as younger than we are, and it's very difficult to get people to take aging seriously at an age of about 45. So how do we overcome that reluctance to consider ourselves as aging?
I was going to say that Suresh may have been old for 20 years already, but I'm definitely not old yet. So I just want to
I think that's what we all claim.
Well, can I add a little thing? Sorry, Brian. This is the beauty, actually. When the biological aging sets in, somehow our psychological and mental aging stops. We will never feel older than 45 to 50, even when I'm 100. Even I feel that. But what does it mean? And that is also a discordance we have to recognize, which sociologists have presented the data. Psychological aging stops almost around 45. Biological aging begins at about the same time. So,
and it's interesting. Björn, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I think aging really is a lifelong process. I mean, there are certainly there's a different degree of maintenance that fails over time, and of course, Suresh is right that our bodies can be maintained for the first 4 decades rather well, but yet aging at its molecular structures is really occurring all the time. I mean, pretty much from embryogenesis onwards, that somatic cells are less well maintained than, for example, germ cells. And so it's a lifelong process, and I think this is very important to understand, that aging doesn't start somewhere when we are old. It doesn't start with 70 years of age, as many would like to think, but it's there all the time. And I think that's why it's important that we think about aging not only of something that is relevant for the elderly, but it's relevant to all of us, even to teenagers. It is relevant how you live and how, because you have a much longer lifespan ahead of you. And I feel that there's a transition in the younger people as well, that they now realize that it's actually a very long life that they could be looking forward to.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Establishing healthy lifestyles in children is an intervention, right? It's not giving drugs to kids. I don't want to do that, but it's establishing behavioral patterns that are going to keep them healthy throughout their life. And so the period of intervention is like, almost from birth. It's just that the kinds of interventions you might want to do differ, and the risk you take probably are very low in the beginning, but you might, be looking at more drug interventions later into middle age. So, it's a life course approach, I think.
And all of this area is being propelled by a fundamental shift in the way people think about themselves, because 60 is the new 40, or 80 is the new 60, whatever you say, but people used to retire and then die within a relatively short space of time. Now people have time in which they want to live their life and be healthy and do all those things that they haven't done during their working lives. So I think there's a societal push for this research that actually hasn't been there before. And also we're looking, I think, at a type of research that is becoming much more mainstream. It's always been a bit under the counter in some ways, aging research, and focused around particular disease areas. But it seems to me that aging research is now out and proud. Would you agree, Brian?
Definitely. I think that it's been largely a problem of public awareness. Some of the slides I'm using to promote the fact that aging is a big risk factor for disease and we need to do something about it, I started using those in the 2005 or 2006, and I think that a lot of other people in the field were saying the same thing. But it's just taken a long period of time to start to get the word out and convince people that this is important. And then on top of that, the changing demographic patterns around the world are making it relevant for politicians and regulators as well to think about what to do about aging. They don't always make the right decision, but at least it's on their minds now. France,
so there's both a push and a pull, isn't there? There's a pull from older people who feel that they're not old, and there's a push from governments who are seeing the cost of aging.
Yes.
And really blanching at the sight of it. We've got some questions coming in, which are really, really interesting. So Walter Crompton's saying here, the term aging is ambiguous and shouldn't be used without a modifier such as chronological or biological. Says it might sound trivial, but the source of widespread misunderstanding. And Steve Hill saying here, there should be more focus on moving towards a unified theory of aging. Now we have multiple theories, all of them likely correct in some ways, but without a unified model, progress is slow. Let's take that second question first. It's a very interesting one. Suresh.
Yeah, that's a very central question to our field, that do we have a theory of aging? When we talk about theories, using the parallels from physics and chemistry, that do we have actually really a theory of aging? That is a problematic thing. That is, yes, we have great ideas that we can call some kind of combined ideas as a theory of aging, because once upon a time there were 300 theories. Every scientist has his own pet area. But then people like Robin Holliday and Len Hayflick and Tom Kirkwood and some of my writings, we started combining then what is the common feature? And the common feature is this progressive intrinsic loss of health or failure of maintenance, or in my writings I use the word shrinkage of the homeodynamic space. Yeah, this is the common factor in the background of everything happening during aging. So that is why calling aging to start from birth is not correct in my understanding, because if the life stages, we have to talk about biology in life stages. If we say aging happens from birth, then okay, then it's then the field of aging biogerontology has to disappear. Yeah, because then we are dealing with biology. Yes, biology happens from life, from birth. So theories of aging, I don't know what more precisely we need. Some mathematical modeling. There are people working with entropy, but I think this concepts of progressive failure of maintenance or shrinkage of the homeodynamic space. Now, this word I have just one extra half a minute I will take. I have just introduced the word homeodynamic because we like to use the word homeostasis. In biology, in biological system, there is nothing homeostatic. There is no state which is static. The only one state is homeostatic, that's life, living. Yes, we carry on living. Survival is homeostatic. Everything else is dynamic, especially when we come to the aging part, where all the changes happening during aging, they are not just passive changes. They are very dynamic changes which result into compensation, adaptation, rearrangement. So that is why everything which happens with age does not need to be set back to some original point. So these things together, I think we do have good understanding of the theory and explanation about why aging happens, how it happens. That's what another point I want to make, the credibility of the field. Yes, aging field was not considered seriously in late 1970s when I was doing my PhD, and soon after PhD, I will tell you my personal experience. Some of my well-wishers, very good friends, and those who thought, they told me, Suresh, call yourself anything, but don't say that you study aging. You will ruin your career. But I'm glad to see that many of those people then came into the field when the term was coined and established, and biogerontology became a regular word, basically. So now the field is amazing, and it's thanks to this next generation from our generation who are doing wonderful work, and people want to join in this field, both for scientific reasons and for social reasons, and even for financial reasons.
Björn, what are your thoughts on that? Because actually the credibility of the field has been really important in attracting the best brains to it, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think it has undergone a dramatic transformation, this field, because a lot of people entered this field from a diverse set of backgrounds. I mean, from geneticists, biochemists, bioinformaticians, chemists, and really a large variety. And it was genetics of aging, that genes regulate the aging process, that now we could really understand genetic pathways, we could understand the aging process. And that has really, I think, provided a really good knowledge setup here. And what is currently happening is also very interesting, because for the first time, we can measure and quantify human biological aging. And that's a really prerequisite also to show that interventions function, and that biological age is something different than chronological age, for example. And I think it really enables that there can be now serious attempts to therapies that can be implemented in humans. And it draws these success stories of the fundamental biology of aging, really is drawing people's imagination. Young people enter the field of aging, which I think, if you ask any geriatrician, it used to be a side field of medicine. Everybody wanted to be a cardiologist, a surgeon, and things like that. Nowadays, actually, young students go into geriatrics, and young biology students are really excited about aging programs. And so I think we have a huge transformation that comes because there's a lot of very serious fundamental science of aging, and it can really show for something.
And actually having scientists of serious quality moving into the field. I mean, you know, I know in Cologne that you've attracted an enormous number of young researchers, where you've got some absolutely stellar researchers there. And actually that's, you know, it's that critical mass, isn't it, of quality researchers attracting others that allows more brains to be put into the subject.
Absolutely, and it's really what is really important. So we, for example, in Cologne, really combine natural science with medicine. So we really have a joint endeavor here. We have graduate schools for aging that draw applicants, young students from all over the world who are really excited about aging research, and they see that things are happening here, that they can ask fundamental questions, and that aging is such an integrated field. So you can study inflammation, you can study cancer, you can study mitochondrial repair mechanisms. Any process, biological process, has links to aging. So really we can work together all across the different disciplines here. And it goes even further than that. It goes into humanities, social science, economics. We can really, but the core has to be health. I think that's very important to realize, but it has a lot of links to many diverse fields.
That's a very interesting point, and it's forgotten often that actually social scientists and those from the arts and the humanities are actually a critical part of these research initiatives. I just want to dispatch one question, which comes from Zef Sophia. According to some old data, people living in the Greek island of Icaria had no intercourse. That was one of the secrets to their longevity. Does this have any base? Do you know what? I suspect it might have been a tale told by fathers anxious to keep their lovely daughters away from the hands of their suitors. I'm going to say, unless I'm interrupted by one of our panelists, I'm going to say that that one probably isn't true, and move swiftly on to Brian to say, how do we get 10 times more brains into the area of aging research?
I was just thinking maybe I don't want to live longer. So. You know, well, first of all, I think the trajectory is definitely in the right direction, and the amount of growth and interest in aging over the last decade is quite amazing. A lot of that money is coming from private sector right now, development, which is good. It's fostering strategies to translate interventions that can slow aging or treat diseases of aging. But we need to match that on the academic side, on the government side, on the philanthropic side, because there are many things that you can do on an academic side that you can't do in the private sector. I'll give an example of one thing we're doing, you know, and by that you're going to have Andrea Meyer on, and she can tell you more about this. But you know, we're trying to compare many different kinds of interventions in humans doing clinical testing against many different biomarkers, and this is a much more agnostic approach. And we want to see which things work better in which people. Now, if you're a company, you're focused on your particular drug or molecule that you're developing, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you don't get that kind of comparison. So there are many, I think, types of research programs that are best done in a nonprofit space, but largely by academics. And they're answering key questions about mechanisms of aging and how to delay the aging process that are not going to be answered effectively if we don't complement the private sector money with public sector money. So it's still about getting governments and philanthropic organizations to see the importance of aging and to put resources into it to match what's happening in the private sector.
We've got a question here. If you had $100 billion to spend to address aging over the next 10 years, so 10 billion a year, how would you spend it? I think that's a very nice magic wand, Adam Grease, you've given to the panelists. What are the most effective ways to deploy massive capital to achieve breakthroughs and get interventions? Because it has to be said that throwing money at something, I mean, you know, look at the cancer moonshot, is not necessarily always the most effective way to promote research. Björn.
Yeah, I think it's very important to realize that it's competition and bottom up. It's not the planning from top down. I know everything, and now I just need hands to execute what should be done. I think we have to realize that aging is a very complex topic, and I really want to second what Brian just explained, that we really need discovery science here. And only from a strong discovery science, we will have the innovations that can then, with private sector money, be transformed into therapies and into the clinic. So this money, I think we really, really want to spend on discovery science, on blue sky research, on creative minds that really can drive forward new insights into the fundamental causes of aging. And the exploitation of those results, I think you can be very certain, if you have a dynamic research environment, you will get translation into commercialization, clinical application, and all that.
So one of the most powerful lobbies for aging research is those who are over 65. But you do develop a bit of a societal issue here, in that there is already a generation gap where the old are, or the older are perceived by younger, particularly in developed economies, to have done very well at the expense of the young. and to spend yet more money on them, developing stuff that makes them, live longer, keep jobs longer at the expense of the young, is going to be a societal problem. In fact, perhaps one of a number of societal problems that this area needs to overcome. And perhaps that's why we need the social scientists involved in this type of work. Brian.
Yeah, I think we're spending too much money on old people, and we could spend a lot less money on old people if we devoted that money toward healthy aging and didn't spend it all on treating their Alzheimer's disease and building nursing homes and treating their cancer. Don't get me wrong, I want to have all the treatment in the world when I get sick, but it's not that we're spending, it would be spending more money on older people. What we want to do is spend money effectively to keep people from getting sick when they get old, and that'll save a lot of money in the long term.
And indeed, the imperative of some of those chronic diseases, diabetes particularly, which is such an accelerant of aging, those are becoming such a huge, not only public health, but overwhelming financial problem, that actually this is going to have to be addressed, because governments can no longer afford to treat the number of people with type 2 diabetes, for example. Suresh.
Yeah, that is again the biggest double-edged kind of question. People like Olshansky have written a lot about this dividend, age dividend, what will be the economic consequences of living longer. But if we have given so much power and decision making in the followers of gods of money, then these are the consequences, of course. Because old age is happening, and then it will need more time. Unless we can convince them that no, people, when they will live longer, they will still keep on working and producing wealth for you guys, then they will perhaps understand it better. Yeah, that, no, they are not going to consume. Yeah, that's why that can be one incentive, to tell them that this will be a wealth producing population. Still, it will not be dependent if they are healthy. But although I personally don't like that language, to surrender to the gods of money, that we will carry on producing for you guys who are ruling us, and not, why can't a civilized society take care of me in my old age if I'm sick and dependent on things? Yeah. We need that kind of, that's why, Vivian, I agree with you that involving sociologists, bioethicists, those kind of people are very, very important. Are we just going to always frighten ourselves because I will need some extra medicines, and then I should feel guilty that I am consuming the resources of the world? So instead I should go out and keep on working to produce the resources. No. These things have to go together. I fully agree with Brian and Björn that we need to do things to maintain and improve health. That will have consequences. It will take care of some parts of the money. But if money people or the gods of money are our deciding factor, then I'm terrified of being old, because then I am burdened, I'm a sucker, I'm a consumer of all the resources. No, I don't want to be. Because we are competing so far, in our generations at least, we are still competing with evolution. It will take much, much longer before we actually can do something about living very long. We need to live healthy now.
So we've got just a little time left in this session. I can't believe it's gone so quickly. It's just wonderful talking to you all. But to really, what are the big areas that we need to focus on? You've already talked about DNA repair, and I have to tell you briefly that I interviewed once a man who was a Soviet rowing champion, who was in the control room of Chernobyl when it blew up, and yet he's still alive, still healthy. And if that's not a kind of testament to DNA repair, having been hit with an extraordinary amount of radiation, I don't know what is. But the DNA repair is certainly extraordinary. Suresh is going to show us what should be the...
No, I just picked up what we need is we don't know how to measure health actually. We all want to talk about health. We don't have really good markers of health. That when we intervene, how to convince me that yes, it has affected my health. That is my incentive to maintain it more. So basically, two concepts in health can be useful if people like those in Singapore, they are developing these ideas on resilience and robustness. Yeah, that is a measure of telling me that okay, and then you have to also educate me. Why should I be healthy? What is good about being healthy? Don't tell me it will give me problem in 40 years time. why should I be healthy today? And how do you measure things? Not showing that my DNA repair has improved a little bit, my telomere length has increased a bit, a methylation has come. No, it has to relate. In science, in genetics of science, self-rated health is most important parameter in genetic studies. Yeah.
I think, Suresh, you make an incredibly important point, because I see so many science studies where there is some biomarker which is some proxy for something. And actually, if the patient doesn't feel better and feel more able to do the things of their normal life, then actually that's completely immaterial. So, Brian, that's one of the things that we have to think about in terms of regulation, isn't it? Is how we set the parameters, how we measure biological aging, and also perhaps how we drive out some of the charlatans in this area who would, you know, tell you your liver's 23 and your kidney's 49 and your brain's 16.
Well, yeah, I think the biomarkers are valuable for different purposes. I mean, they're valuable for researchers because they look like they're going to be good endpoints for interventions, and we need to understand what's working and what's not. And injecting science and well-controlled studies into this area, including supplements, is one way to sort out what's working from what's not working. So there's a clear value to those biomarkers from that perspective. The reaction people have to some of these biomarkers is quite interesting. I think there is a significant interest in people knowing their biologic age, and you can see that people are paying to get their biologic age tested now. And one of the interesting things that happens is that they get their biologic age back, and if it's younger, they're happy. If it's older, they pretty much decide that your test isn't valid. So, but at least there is some.
I thought it was a useless test anyway. What are they?
but I think that, you know, also that these interventions to keep you healthy, I think one thing to keep in mind is that a lot of them, if they work, are going to make you healthier and more functional now in middle age. I mean, the functional decline doesn't happen after you're 65 only. It happens, you know, for a much wider period of your life. And if we have interventions that slow or reverse aspects of aging, there will be more immediate impacts than 20 years down the road. I think it's important to get that message across to people.
Yeah, someone saying here there needs to be more emphasis on functional aging biomarkers. You know, 6-minute walk test, chair rise, grip strength, exercise capacity. And can I say, I just cheer when I run upstairs and there's a 25-year-old behind me puffing.
Yeah, I agree with that too. But a lot of those are not as valuable across the lifespan, and they're only valuable later in life. So, you know, the benefit of a lot of these biomarkers now is, if they're accurate, is that they can measure your rate of biologic aging throughout most of your life. And that gives a lot more information than some of these others. If we had functional markers earlier in life that were effective, that would be great, I think. So
Björn, where would you concentrate research at the moment?
I think we need to, for example, genome maintenance is a very fundamental process that is required. If you don't repair better, you will get cancer through mutagenesis, and you will get other diseases of age. The links to all these different hallmarks of aging, these are all these homeostatic processes that fail, they need to be addressed, they need to be understood. I think it's very important that we transition more and more also in human aging, because one thing that is very difficult to model in the laboratory animals is the diversity, the genetic and epigenetic diversity of human aging, which these biomarkers that Brian described are really very valuable in identifying also individual aging trajectories. I think this will be extremely important. I think one of the fundamental limitations that we have also as a field is that we're talking here about disease prevention. Health maintenance means disease prevention, and we are very bad in long-term planning as humans, and we are very bad in adjusting our behavior if the effect is not immediate, but it might be years or even decades away. These biomarkers will help to alleviate this, because they give us a very much more immediate kind of bill of whether we've been behaving well with our bodies or not. And so they will greatly help this long-term planning, the disease prevention. And I hope that this will also then raise the awareness also of politicians, of charities and so on, that we really have to massively invest more into discovery science of aging to really tackle this issue. And that disease prevention will really be the paradigm shift of medicine that is absolutely required to keep us healthy in this demographically changing world we're living in.
So thank you to all three of our panelists there. You've been absolutely splendid. The time has just flown by. But what I'm getting from you is that there is huge potential for basic research here. On many different angles. There are all sorts of fundamentals that we need to develop, in terms of biomarkers and really important, not proxies of aging, but to make sure that we have a baseline by which we can measure along the life course, and that this is a very exciting area, which actually I think is on a tipping point, where it's gone from kind of fringe to absolute mainstream. And I suspect that from mainstream, it's going into supernova mode. So thank you all very much indeed. We're going to have a brief 5-minute break. We'll be back on the hour for our next session, which is we're going to look at translational medicine. How do we take the discoveries that have been made into products, services, treatments, which are going to be effective. Back in a moment.